So what the folks I need who are on the computers in the lab, what I need you to do is you actually are going to need to sign in on the computer. So there's there should be an icon like this on your desktop that says Adobe Creative Cloud, and I want you to double click on that. Yeah, you go ahead and leave the browser.
I didn't get the email, and I checked my junk mail too.
Okay,
So the reason why it's having you log in twice is because you logged in on the website first just to get get your account going, but now you actually have to log in on the machine to make the software available, to activate the software. Unfortunately, that's the way Adobe has changed things with the site licenses. They've made it a little bit more difficult and expensive. So unfortunately, if you're using the computers in the lab, you have to log in like that each time. Okay, and once you're logged in, I can see at the back of the room, Jackie, that's fine. It's just going to tell you you're not allowed to manage apps because IT is not going to allow us to do it. But once you have that screen, you can actually minimize or close out of that Creative Cloud application. You can open Lightroom Classic, so not LR, but LRC. Everybody's in Lightroom Classic. So minor differences between Lightroom and Lightroom Classic. I prefer to use Lightroom Classic because it's a little bit more robust. Lightroom is actually designed to, it's a cloud-based program. So there are advantages to it. And I encourage you guys to explore once you understand a little bit more about Lightroom. It's a good product. The benefit of Lightroom over Lightroom Classic is if you load your photos into Lightroom, it's actually in the cloud, okay? So you're actually putting your files into your Adobe Cloud. Okay, so and you would actually have to have a paid account for that. The benefit there is that you then have the ability to edit your photos from a tablet or your phone. So you can actually load Lightroom on your phone and edit on your phone or your tablet. I don't do that because the editing that I do is I just do more editing. I need the desktop or the laptop is a lot faster, and Lightroom Classic has some features that Lightroom, the mobile-based app, does not have. So that's why I choose to use Lightroom Classic. So you're not missing anything except that ability to edit mobilely if you're using Lightroom Classic versus Lightroom. Okay? Still a good product. You can close all that stuff. You can close down all the little welcome messages it's going to give you. And unfortunately, it is going to tell you each time that you get in here and log on that you are, logging on for the first time. These machines are set up to so that the students can't mess them up, so that people can't make changes. It's going to reset clean every time so that they function well. So every time you go into Lightroom, it's going to behave like you're in Lightroom for the very first time. Okay. All right. So let's talk about. I'm going to have you guys. So those of you who are on the computers in the lab, hopefully everyone brought a large thumb drive or a portable hard drive. Go ahead and plug those in because we're going to create a catalog for you. I think that folks on our desktops probably already have catalogs started. If you don't, of course, we'll help you with that as well. We want to make sure everybody has a catalog. I'm going to show you guys how to do that. And again, we're going to do this we're going to do it intentionally. All right. And then I have that sample photo. I'm going to have you guys copy over to your computer, whether it was through the email or off of the network, so that we can all be working on the same photograph together. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to get you guys in Lightroom. We're going to get the software going. We're going to, get that catalog so that you can port it back and forth. And then we're going to walk through some features on one common file so we can all kind of see when we're doing the same thing and what different sliders are doing. And you can see real time instead of just watching us do it up here. You can play around. We'll talk about what some of these different sliders do. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you guys how to, manage and create your own catalog. Okay, so here on this computer, I actually have a folder that I've called J. O'Brien, and I'll create a new one for us to work from, where I'm gonna do the same thing I'm asking you guys to do in class. But I just want to show you guys what these files look like before I do that. So here you see I have a number of folders. I have Downtown Lights, Eric has the best photos, Jay's Lightroom catalog, OWL, photo class, and test. Obviously, the Jay's Lightroom catalog is the folder I created to put my catalog into my files. So if I go into that, and I have this test catalog I created in there, I actually have two catalogs in here. And I want to show you that we have, really I'm only using this test catalog too. There are a number of files that are associated with that. Lightroom, when you create a catalog, it's actually going to create a number of files. And like I said, it's database driven. Okay, so this test catalog 2 is actually the catalog I am working from. And then it has a number of files that help it along. We have this LR cat lock and dash wall. And then I have a couple of folders. And inside of the folders, I have other files that are also helping that main. So like here's that database. You can see, and you don't have to drill down into all these. I'm showing you that this is how catalog is actually, Lightroom is creating the catalog and all the files that manage what is happening within your catalog. So there's all kinds of things in here. It's just creating, a massive file structure. You don't ever have to look at this part. You just have to know to port it back and forth, okay? And when I mean port it back and forth, we're going to actually create your catalog on your storage media so that it's right where you want it to be, and then you can access it from anywhere. We can switch back and forth from catalogs anytime, all right? You can have multiple catalogs. So, if Lightroom is designed to make it easy for you, so that it just happens automatically. If you're working on a local computer, like your desktop or your laptop, but sometimes it's useful to actually manage that catalog yourself, particularly if you want to move your catalog from one computer to another. This is a good thing to know. So like, say you create a catalog on your computer, you buy a new computer, you need to know how to get those files from your old computer and put them onto the new computer so you don't lose your catalog. So there's files associated just like anything else. And we should understand how that we work that. Now, creating a new catalog, I'm actually going to create a new structure here. And I want you guys to follow along with this. I'm going to do it on the desktop of this computer. And you guys who are on your laptops, this is a good practice. You don't have to use this catalog later that we're going to create. But I want you to create a catalog. You could just put it on your desktop, and that's fine. You can move it later if you want to keep it. If you want to get rid of it later, you can get rid of it. For those of you who are on the college computers, I want you to create your new catalog on your external storage media, okay? So how you create a new catalog. I'm going to create my folder here because I want to do this cleanly. I'm going to manage my files. So I'm going to call this workshop. And inside of workshop, I'm going to go ahead and create two folders. One's going to be photos. And then another one is going to be catalogs. Okay? So go ahead and create some sort of file structure, whatever makes sense to you. You can actually use workshop, photos, and catalogs just to make life easy. Boom. There we go. Because you want, if you save things on the college computers, next week when you come back, they're going to be gone, and that would be bad. Okay? All right. So next I'm going to go into Lightroom. So most of you are already in Lightroom. So go ahead and get Lightroom up, make it live. So like I said, by default, the catalog is just going to create like a generic catalog, and it's just by default going to put it in your pictures or your photos folder. So to make your own catalog so that you can do that deliberately, you're going to go to File and New Catalog. So everyone find File and New Catalog. Don't go any further than that. Just okay. And then I'm going to tell it I want a new catalog. So go ahead and click on New Catalog now.
You guys already did.
And now it's going to ask you where you want to create that catalog. So don't do anything. Don't just automatically click yes. Now we're going to navigate to where we want the catalog to be. For everybody, it's going to be a little bit different. Mine is actually on the desktop. So I'm going to go to Desktop, Workshop, Catalogs, and then I'm going to stop there. All right, now we're going to create a name for our catalog. And Lightroom is actually going to create a complete file structure inside of here. So inside the catalogs folder, there will then be another folder that is the name of the catalog we're going to create. So we can actually have multiple catalogs in here if we want for different things. All right, so I'm just going to create a catalog called Workshop. And now when I do this, when I click Create, you're going to think that you did something wrong because Lightroom is going to shut down, okay? But that's okay. That's designed that way. When you create a new catalog, Lightroom is going to shut down because it is actually already accessing all of those other files for that default catalog or whatever catalog you have. So it's going to shut down. It's going to create all the files that it needs for the new catalog, and it's going to relaunch Lightroom with the new catalog open. So when I press Create, I'll skip this time. It shut down Lightroom. It's now working its magic in the background. It's creating the files. And in a moment here, Lightroom is going to come back up with that brand new catalog that I just created. And now you can see Lightroom is launching the new catalog for me. The folder that you're creating is not actually going to have photos in it. This is just your catalog. Yep, everybody's catalog should look blank. All right. So I want to show you, you don't have to go through this next part. I just want to show you what it looks like. So you've just created a new catalog inside that folder. So if I go to my files and I'm going to go to Workshop where I had my catalogs, there's now a folder called Workshop, and Lightroom has created all of these files that are going to manage the new catalog. All right. Now, really easy for me to go back and forth. You don't have to do this, but I just want to show you. I can actually, in Lightroom, go to Open Recent Catalog, and I have a number of catalogs in here. You can see. I can go back to that test catalog, tell it to relaunch. Give it a moment here to catch up. And I'm back in the catalog I was in before. So you can have multiple catalogs for different purposes. I'm now going to go back to the new catalog we created so mine looks just like yours. And of course, let it, oh, skip again. So this could be helpful. It's like maybe you have a catalog for, if you're doing photographs, like one's for your family and it's all family photographs and kids, but then maybe you want to have a separate catalog for any kind of business venture, whatever makes sense to you, okay? All right, the next thing I'm going to do is we're now going to put that file that we have into, and I'm going to close these down so I can do it in one window. We need to get that sample file I gave to you guys into your photos folder so that we can import it into the catalog. So for those of you who have it in your email, wherever you downloaded it to, you're going to navigate to that. For those of you who are on the network machines, there is a drive called the Photoshop drive. So, and you're going to access that through using your file manager. So the documents icon right here. Okay, so now we're going to, again, it's really important that we manage our files manually so that we don't, you guys are seeing how quickly this can go horribly awry, all right? This is why we manage our own files. We're not gonna, it's very nice of Adobe to try and do that for us, but we're not gonna let them because they're gonna mess us up, all right? So now, I've navigated to where I have that photo that I want to copy. So I'm going to copy that file. And now I'm going to go back to my storage media. So I'm going to go to my desktop, workshop, photos. And I'm also going to create a folder. You don't want to just dump. You don't want to have a folder that just has like hundreds and thousands of photographs in it. Okay? Inside your photos folder, wherever you're going to store your photos, create some sort of structure that works for you. I'm going to honor my wife tonight, and we're going to call my folder 042721. Normally, I would call it like something ridiculous like, editing workshop test. So I'm going to create a new folder in here, 042721. And I'm going to paste that photo into that folder. All right. Everybody has a photo. All right. Now we're going to import that photo into our catalog. All right. So I'm going to go back to Lightroom now. Just by clicking that icon at the bottom of the screen. And I'm in the library module. This is the easy way to import files. And so we're managing our own files. I'm not going to click the import button. I'm going to do this through this folders tab in this panel over here. So it has a little plus where it says create new folder. It's not actually creating a new folder. It's just going to ask me where I want to import the files from. So folder and the little plus sign, which is create new folder. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to add a folder. Okay? You're with me? You can go ahead and click add folder when you're ready, and then I'll show you how to navigate to the correct folder. Once everybody's with me. All right. It's going to bring up this file menu just like anything else. Like you're opening something in Microsoft Word, you're going to navigate to wherever your folders are. It's different for everybody. Mine's on the desktop workshop catalog. It's actually into catalog. So I'm going to go back to workshop, photos, 042721. And then it's not gonna show any things in there. And you're gonna say, what's wrong? Where's my photo? That's okay, that's exactly what it's supposed to look like. I'm just gonna tell it I wanna select the folder. It's only looking for a folder. Okay, I'm gonna select the folder now. So you guys can see that this is what it's supposed to look like. Okay, even though there didn't show there were any images in there, it was only looking for a folder. So now, it's now gonna ask me what of these photos I actually want to import. So, and of course, we have a couple of different options. We can do all photos. If we had a bunch of them in here, we could select which ones we want to import. So that's, typically we're probably just going to import all of the photos in that folder. So once you're to this view, it's okay to go ahead and click import. So I know that seemed really complicated and arduous, but you have just now gotten, you have a catalog, you have a photo in your catalog, and you have done it all manually. You set your folders up yourself. This is gonna make your files much easier to manage, okay? Now that we have a photo in the catalog, we're gonna take a step back. We're gonna talk about what we can do, and then we're gonna walk through step by step and actually edit this photograph together so that you guys can see that the same things that we're doing here, you've got all the same options. That's why we gave you this sample photo, so that it's easy for you to see, how this is gonna correlate. And then there's also some differences. We're gonna talk, when we talk about what type of file we have, okay? All right. But before we do that, I'm gonna take a quick break. Be right back. Everyone stretch your legs really fast. We're gonna do just a few minutes here. This is a good breaking point before we dig into some more stuff with the software. All right, so I want to talk about different file types for those, because I know some of you guys are aware of this, some of you guys are not. So you can set your camera up to shoot JPEG or RAW. And there's some differences to how you can, what those files are capable of, and how you can edit those files in Lightroom. Because you're here, you are probably to the point where it actually makes sense to start trying to shoot RAW, okay? Most of the time when I have this discussion with people, I tell them, it's totally fine to shoot JPEG until you actually know what you're gonna do with RAW. Well, that's part of what this class is about. You're actually going to be, the information that we get when we shoot a RAW file, you can actually leverage it with Lightroom. Lots of people, they're never going to touch software that will actually take advantage of that RAW information. So let me talk about basically what these two file formats are. Your camera shoots and records this much information. It has a native RAW format that it is always going to be shooting and capturing. If you shoot RAW, it will keep all of the data. It will keep all of that information. If you shoot JPEG, the camera is processing some of that information for you and only keeping part of the information. Now, if what you're doing is you're not going to have a high quality output, if you're just taking photographs to Walmart and you're not going to edit the photographs at all, shooting JPEG is just fine. There's nothing wrong with shooting JPEG. JPEG is a perfectly fine file format. In fact, even if you shoot RAW, you're probably going to output to JPEG at some point, because RAW file formats are not used by Walmart. You can't take your RAW files to Walmart, Walgreens, and have photos printed. Even if you're working with a high-end printer, you don't give them raw files. They'll ask you to do like something like a high quality TIFF or something of that nature. So raw is how we capture and how we're going to process, but we do export to JPEG and TIFF. JPEG is a fantastic file format. There's lots of reasons why we use JPEG. It uses a compression format. Compression format just means it makes the file small, so that it makes it really easy to email it, all right? A file that's raw, that you take one photograph off your camera, a file that's raw might be 20 megabytes. That same photograph as a JPEG might be 5 megabytes, okay? So much easier to transport. Your friends, your family, they can't use RAW. They can use JPEG, all right? So RAW is a great file format, and because you're here in this context using Lightroom, shooting RAW is a good idea because we can leverage all of that information. If you're not using Lightroom, you don't necessarily need to use RAW. You can shoot JPEG. And one of the things we'll show you how to do is that after we play with some photos in Lightroom, in order to make that usable, you have to export it as something, okay? All the edits that we do in Lightroom really only live in Lightroom until we export the file into another usable format for everyone else, okay? But much more editing possibilities. Like it says here, Cadillac file type, there's just so much more information, so much easier to edit, so much more you can do with it. With JPEG, easy to, it's very portable, doesn't need to be exported. You can edit JPEGs, you just can't edit JPEGs as effectively because there's not as much information. And I love Chevy file type. So yeah, it depends on what you're doing. But certainly if you're here and you're interested in editing photographs, there's a case for shooting RAW. Now, how many are you shooting RAW right now? I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. That's actually something, if we get to the end of class and you're not sure, I don't know if you brought cameras, you probably didn't. If you're not sure how to get your camera to shoot RAW, if you have it here tonight, I'm happy to look at that camera with you. If you don't have it here, bring it next week. I'll show you how to get your camera set to shoot RAW, okay? All right, so that's the basics of it. There's a whole bunch more there that we can talk about, but we're gonna move forward. We're just gonna talk a little bit about it. And the file that we gave you to practice with tonight is a RAW file. And it's even gonna look different. In fact, I might have Nicole really quickly export that file as a JPEG and then load it. Just do it on the computer here, babe. And then we'll add the JPEG version to the catalog so you can see them side by side and see the differences of how each of those work. So.
Or just didn't want to screw.
Oh, that's right. You can't do it at the same time. Here, I'm just going to do that real quick. It'll take 2 seconds, and it'll actually give me an opportunity to reinforce how to export. So like I said, when you edit a file in Lightroom, you can't really deliver that file as, with the data that's just natively in Lightroom. Everything that we do in Lightroom, we have to export the file. So I'm going to export this file. You don't have to do this. I can show you everything up here. So all I'm going to do is, there's a number of ways to do this. The easiest way is just to right-click on the file and go to export. And I'll do that. I'm going to put it in the same folder as the original folder. I'm not going to put it into a subfolder, and I'm going to call it, actually, I'm going to do, no, I'm just going to do custom name. I don't even need the sequence. So I'm just going to call it JPEG version. And I'm just going to go down here and, oh, I went too far. Where am I? There we go. Okay, JPEG quality 100%, and I'm going to export that into the same place. And then I'm going to really quick go back to the library, and I'm actually going to update this folder. I'm going to synchronize the folder. And what synchronize the folder does is if I have a folder that's already existing and I add photos to that folder, I can synchronize the folder, and it should just, any new photo in the folder should just show up, and it is. So I did something wrong.
There's a 2 there, you just.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so now I have a JPEG version and a RAW version. So this is the RAW version. This is the JPEG version. Okay, or no, actually, backwards. You're right, my bad. So here's the JPEG version. All right, and I just want to have that there because I want to show you kind of the differences in what that's going to look like when you edit, and how, you know, not all the numbers are going to be exactly the same. Okay. All right. So our editing workflow, I want to just talk you through how we edit things. So we're going to talk about the workflow, and then we're going to go through, and we're actually going to work through the workflow with you guys. So you can do this as we do this, and actually, you know, click the same button, see where everything lives. So when we work in Lightroom, there's certain things that you'll develop your own workflow. This is a workflow that makes sense for us. So typically, we actually work in the lens corrections panel first. There's a couple of things we can do there. We can remove chromatic aberration, and we can make lens profile corrections. We'll talk in a little more detail on a future slide what that means. Then we go to the detail panel, where we can manage noise and sharpening. If we have an image that has a lot of noise, we can actually decrease that noise in that panel. And then we can also use sharpening to increase the appearance of detail. There's a lot of ways that we can actually do that, and we're going to talk you through some different methods and talk about how they function. Then we actually go to that basic panel, and that's where we then can start to work with the white balance of the photograph, so we can correct the color a little bit. We can work with the exposure and contrast. So the overall exposure, and then, you know, how extreme the lights and darks are. We can work in those specific highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. We showed you guys a little bit of that last week. You're going to get a chance to actually play with it tonight. And then we're going to go to texture, clarity, dehaze, vibrance, and saturation. And we actually only really routinely use a couple of those. We're going to talk about the differences between them, what that actually means. Some of them, again, have to do with contrast, and then, of course, vibrance and saturation. You guys probably know that has to do with the color, like how much the color pops. Okay, so first, lens corrections. Okay, so let's talk really quickly about what chromatic aberration is. And did we talk about this at all last week? No. Okay, so there are some things, some inherent issues with your camera lens. We won't get too detailed on it. But your camera lens is actually going to distort some things a little bit in a couple of different ways. So one way is this thing called chromatic aberration. And chromatic aberration is just that some lenses do it more than others, but you'll actually get these weird color haloing effects. So you get these strange color edges with your image. The lens correction panel actually allows us to reduce and diminish those. It's a really simple feature. It's literally just a checkbox, all right? So based on the metadata in your file, the software can actually correct that pretty effectively and easily, okay? So all it does is, you know, chromatic aberration just means this is pretty extreme. Most of the time, it's actually much less than this. It might just be like a little green edge or a little magenta edge when you zoom in really tight. And when we show you those opposite options in just a moment, you'll be able to see what that looks like. And this is actually corrected in a program called Aperture, but we can do it with Lightroom as well, okay? Now, the other thing that we have with lenses that can be a problem is that the lenses, because they are concave and convex inside your lens, it's not just flat glass. There's actually concave and convex glass in there, and then just naturally also like a wide angle lens, there's distortion that has to, that's just basically inherent of the lenses and the glass. And by distortion, what we mean is that the image actually bows. It's rounded around the exterior of the image. Different lenses are going to have more extreme issues. Like I said, wide angle lenses, lots and lots of distortion, okay? But it's really easy to correct them. So it's going to straighten that up fairly effectively. It's very trustworthy. You don't have to sweat it too much. You can manually do it, but we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to use these check boxes, and all it does is, again, reads the metadata of your file when your camera shoots and creates that file. One of the things it does is it records all kinds of information that are associated with the file at that moment that you shot the file. So it's going to record your ISO, your shutter speed, your aperture. It's also going to record what camera you're shooting, what type of lens you're shooting, and the magnification of the lens. And using that information about the type of lens that you're shooting and the magnification of the lens, the developers have created programming so that the software can really easily make a correction specifically for that lens and magnification. So it's really, really simple stuff. It isn't perfect. There's no way to completely get rid of the distortion. You can do some things manually if you're really concerned about it, but it does a pretty darn good job. In fact, for the most part, you probably haven't even really noticed it if you haven't really looked at this, because it's not like, every once in a while, if you're using a really wide angle lens, you might think, wow, that just looks kind of funny. It'll be more apparent as we look at this. There are some other things that'll happen as well. There's what's called vignetting. Your camera it distorts more toward the edge of the lens than in the middle of the lens. And it's not just that warping, but it's also some discoloration of color and maybe some darkness. So the image will actually brighten as well, that you'll notice as you apply these lens corrections as well. All right. I do it over here. So let's look at, so now in Lightroom, I want you guys all do this together with me. So go ahead and open up Lightroom, and we're going to find this folder, and I'm going to have you guys do this with me. So I'm on this IMG 8968 CR2. CR2 is Canon's raw file format. Okay, and if I go down, I don't have to go, it's down toward the bottom. I have a lens correction panel that I can expand. So I want to zoom in, and actually we don't have to zoom in. We'll just, so go ahead and we're going to click on chromatic aberration first, do it slowly, and try to notice if you see any changes. You're not going to see anything on chromatic aberration, but I think it's going to be pretty obvious when we click on enable profile correction. So go ahead and do that and watch how the image changes. You see it bump in the middle, okay? So it actually, again, it detected that lens, what kind of lens was being shot. It calculated based on the lens and the magnification, what kind of warp would have been there, and it just corrected it for us. If you have JPEG files, depending on how you transfer your files, some wonky things can happen. And I see this all the time because I work with a lot of different students. One of the problems is that this is another argument for manually managing your own files. Depending on how you transfer files, sometimes different software will strip the metadata. So Annie had a photograph that she took last week. She downloaded it. I don't know how she did it, and it's okay. But she transferred her files in some way that the JPEG no longer has the metadata. And if it doesn't have the metadata, then the software is going to be like, I don't know what camera or lens this photograph was taken with, so I can't make that automatic correction. So again, doing things manually, very deliberately, protects you from having that kind of issue.
When you export it as a JPEG, does it take away the metadata?
It should not. You can tell it. So if I select on this one here, actually it did. So I must have it set up in Lightroom that has already, so let me show this again here. So
I don't think you had everything.
I didn't look at everything, yeah. So when you export, there is a metadata tab, and that should have done it. It says all metadata.
I did it from Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic. No?
It's possible. It's possible. This should have kept the metadata.
I was lazy,
So.
but I don't know. I
Interesting.
have to look at it more.
Well, and for the most part, once you export a JPEG, you're probably not going to use that data as much. So, but you should be able to retain that information. But the more you manually manage your files, the less that kind of issue will happen. Okay? You want all of that data. All right, so I wanted to show you guys, let's take a look really tightly now to see if we can actually see that chromatic aberration. And Nicole was using a pretty high-end lens, so this might not be a good example. She was using her Cadillac this day, so we might not see a lot of chromatic aberration in this one. So what I've done is I've zoomed in, and then there's a before and after, which is this Y button here, and it will show us what the photograph looked before the corrections and after the corrections. And as you can see here, looking at this one, there's a little bit of a color difference. The color's a little bit richer, a little bit more vibrant. We don't have a lot of chromatic aberration that I can see here. Maybe if I find a different spot of contrast. Yeah, the lens she used was too nice. We need our sample files to be of a lesser lens. So yeah, that's one of the advantages of as you purchase lenses, higher end lenses actually, the manufacturers are doing things to ensure that there's not as much chromatic aberration. In fact, I don't even see that there. And that's a clean lens. Terrible example file. Instructor fail, my bad.
I wasn't looking.
So sorry. I should have purposely found a file that was shot with a lesser lens. So this is this 24 to 72.8 L series is a gorgeous, gorgeous lens, and also has a gorgeous, gorgeous price on it. So, but we can see. If I go back to fit, you can see the differences in the color. The distortion's not dramatic, but there is a little bit of distortion there as well. Really look at the color over in here, how much more that pops now. Again, depending on the file, it's going to look a little bit different. And then when you're done with that before and after view, you'll just come back over here to the loop view. And there's a shortcut for that. You can just hit D on the keyboard as well. All right. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do after we make those lens corrections is we'll start to look at noise reduction and sharpening, okay? So depending on how you shot, your image may have more or less noise, and Lightroom has some techniques that we can use to reduce that noise in the image. particularly if we're shooting a higher ISO. This image is probably not going to be terribly noisy because it was shot in daylight, and I'm going to guess that Nicole was shooting like ISO 100 or 200, so it's probably going to be relatively clean, but we can still play with it a bit. Sharpening is another thing that we can do that enhances the photograph. So sharpening is one of the many ways that we can change the contrast of an image. Now, when we look at a photograph, we read detail where there is contrast. If an image has high contrast, it will feel sharper. Our eyes are always looking for higher contrast. We look for sharpness, okay? So one of the ways that we can make an image pop is by using techniques to increase the contrast of those edges, all right? Again, there's lots of different ways we can do it. We can globally increase the contrast, which we'll look at, and then we have a number of other ways that we can manipulate the contrast. Sharpening is one of those ways. So what sharpening does is it actually is going to specifically target areas of contrast. So here, this example here, we have these edges, this white and black, and then the black and gold. That is going to, sorry, I don't mean to be rude and look at my watch there, but my disabled aunt is on her own tonight, so I have to watch my phone, but that was not her, so we're good. So what's going to happen is it's not going to increase when we sharpen, it doesn't increase the contrast everywhere. It specifically looks for edges and pops the contrast just on that edge. Okay? And there's a number of different ways that we can manipulate that. We have sharpening, we have the amount of the sharpening. So how great of a difference, how dramatic do we want that contrast to be? And you guys can play with this as I'm talking about it. Go ahead. And then I'll play with it as well. So amount is how dramatic, how great is that contrast? The higher we ramp up the sharpening, the greater the contrast will be. The radius is how far away from that edge of contrast we are manipulating the contrast. If we increase, so at first, the sharpening will be right on the edge. If we increase the radius, it will expand the distance from that area of contrast that it increases the contrast.
How do you access that sharpening?
It's under the detail panel. My apologies. The detail panel.
How come that doesn't go right and right?
So the answer, so Bill just asked, when do I know when it's where it needs to be? And the answer is, it depends. Okay, here's one of the things. Bill just gave me the most disappointed look I've ever seen from Bill.
How dare you?
If there was a magic number that you could use for every single button, for every single photograph, then instead of Lightroom, we would just have like a program and there'd be like, you know, like, what is it, the office, or no, what's the office supply store that it's like the easy button. We would have an easy button, okay? We don't have an easy button because no photograph is the same. They're all different. So the amount of sharpening that you use and the radius and the detail and the masking is going to be different on every single photograph. You have to make decisions, judge it by your own eye, develop your eye. Now, typically, I have a lot of photographers that will tell you, they say that this is actually standard. If you go out there and read all the articles, most of the people who are writing articles about sharpening, they will say, I usually start at about 50, and then I go up or down a little bit from there. And there's a lot of sharpening effects in different software. If you hit sharpening, it will actually start at about 50. So I don't know how helpful that is. So it just really depends, because as Nicole was playing with that, and what I'll do is hit the Y button here. Nicole was watching the grain, okay? She was trying to get a little bit of sharpening without, see how she dramatically, she just like, just for illustration purposes, she just like popped it, she just went crazy with it. Well, that, if we zoom out, that might look okay-ish, but if you actually print that, any reasonably high quality print, all of that grain is gonna be apparent. You're gonna see all of it. And your output actually has a little bit to do with that as well. You know, most of you, you're looking at, we're talking about higher quality outputs. If I'm printing a 5x7, could I sharpen to that level and get away with it? Maybe. It might be okay. If I was going to send this to the newspaper, I can sharpen like crazy, because that's actually like 4 process color. The ink bleeds everywhere. So highly sharpened images look fantastic in newsprint. But if you're going to print an 8x10 or a higher quality print, you don't want to go nuts with your sharpening, because it will become apparent. You'll be able to actually see that really aggressive sharpening, all those little tiny dots, because that's one of the problems with sharpening, is that we're trying to find those edges, but the more aggressive we are with it, the software is going to find a lot of contrast that you don't see and that you don't want to pump it, okay? You just are looking for a little bit of moderate contrast to enhance on the visible edges. So 150, yeah, that's probably way too much in most cases, unless you're doing a lower size output or like newsprint. And most of you guys are not going to be doing that. Now, if the newspaper has like a photography contest, go for it. Just sharpen the heck out of those bad boys. You'll be fine. But for most of what we're going to be doing, if we're creating like a high quality, like an 8x10 print or an art print, you don't want to go nuts with it. Now, again, the radius, that's, you know, the more we ramp up the radius, the further away from the edge that's going to actually affect. You see how like now we're getting this like haloing effect here, because it's a really aggressive radius. So you don't want to go nuts with the radius either. And the detail is actually one that is, I probably like use the least, but it's and a little bit more difficult to explain. And in fact, I might have to cheat. Hang on a second.
I don't think I've ever in my life changed the detail to the standard, from the standard setting of 25.
So this is the kind of stuff here. So, oh, that's right, okay. The detail, that's why I don't use the detail. I just had to remind myself. So the detail, so there's the amount of contrast, so amount, the radius, how far from that amount, from that area of contrast. Detail is how aggressive do you want to be in finding the contrast. So when you ramp up the detail, the software is going to look for areas of lesser and lesser contrast to increase the contrast, which is why I don't really use that, because now you're getting really aggressive. You can see here when Nicole ramps that up, all kinds of ugly, nasty things happen. So again, it would have to be like a very particular type of image that you would use that with. And there are a lot of sliders. I'm going to tell you, like, there are lots of things in Lightroom I just don't use regularly. Okay, and that's definitely one of them. Now, masking is really useful. Masking is where we can protect areas of the image. And there's also a really cool way that you can even see how it's masking. So what Nicole is doing here is that not only is she playing with the masking, but she's holding down the Alt key, which is giving her a preview of where the masking is actually going to be applied. So by increasing the masking, we're actually protecting the diffuse areas, diffuse meaning soft, areas of the photograph. So that's one of the ways that we can pop the contrast on specific areas, but then protect some of these softer areas. So as she ramps that up, notice that this area in here is getting softer and softer, but this area is staying highly sharpened. Okay, but it's also, but it's still like that detail and the amount is just way too much. But she's doing that for dramatic purposes, just to help you guys see and understand that. All right, I think we have enough time to keep going on. Where did my present? Oh, here we go. Keep going with the basic panel. Okay, last week we talked about this, but I want to go through this where and how. What's that?
Did you already do noise? Illuminate?
Oh, no. Hit escape for me. I just went straight to sharpening. Okay, so the second part of the details panel is the noise reduction. And noise reduction is also going to help us. You might want to reset a bunch of that.
Yep.
This is all kinds of.
No.
Okay, so noise reduction is, we have a lot of natural grain in here, in these diffuse areas, that we really don't want that. We want that to be nice and soft. And the higher your ISO is, the greater amount of noise you're going to see in those areas. So by using noise reduction, specifically, we're going to use luminance. You can actually, as she moves it over, yeah, there we go. It's starting to soften up. See how the noise in the back, well, actually all over the place. And yeah, there we go. She's going to do that for me. See how much softer that is? And now she's done this really dramatically, but you know, if you zoom out, it's probably, you know, we don't see, it's not really detracting too much, a little bit, the overall sharpness. So she wouldn't want to completely go that far, but we want to, of course, have in the soft focus areas, we definitely want to pay attention to that. And these are things that, as we move forward in class, you can actually apply these some of these things selectively as well.
And this is something you have to be careful with. If you have a lot of noise and you try to get as much out of it as you can also lose detail in your photo. One of my favorite examples is, you know, you have Yoda, somebody has a lot of noise in it, and they just did what I did and bumped it up to 100 to get all the noise out. But they also, in doing that, took out the wrinkles in his forehead.
Yeah.
It's just a flat, smooth, because it's like blending everything together to reduce that noise.
In fact, a lot of these contrast tools that we're talking about, both in the detail panel and when we get to clarity and texture, you know, and dehaze, we can use them to enhance detail. We can actually use them to soften things. But if we're too aggressive in either case, we're going, if we increase the contrast too much, we're going to end up with grainy, nasty images. If we decrease it too much, like one of the techniques is like, you know, Nicole just gave, you know, the example of, you take a portrait of someone, they, you know, they're older like I am, they got some lines here and there. You want to soften up their skin a little bit just to make it, you know, seem a little bit cleaner. But if you go too far, now you've completely removed lines, and I look like I'm plastic. I look like I'm made of plaster, and I'm no longer a human.
Like those Instagram filters.
Exactly.
Rid of all the
Yeah.
freaking
Yeah.
pores on
If
your
you want to
skin,
do that, just use Instagram.
and you look like a Barbie doll.
Exactly. Okay. So yes, Matt, thank you. That's a great example. So each of these, you know, all these things we want to use in moderation, and it's going to take practice. You're going to, you know, you want to play with it, but always, always, always be careful not to over edit or edit too aggressively. You know, over editing is a big issue. It's what I like to say. It's the Spider-Man. It's the Uncle Ben advice from Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. All right, you got to remember that. And then there's the dad rule that my dad. I'm sure everybody's dad said this to me. My dad said this to me all the time growing up. Just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Everybody's dad say that to them? Okay, so we have Uncle Ben's rule and we have dad rules, okay? So moderation, always moderation. Okay, now to talking about basics, okay? So the basics panel, we're gonna look at white balance and tone, and then we're gonna cut it and we'll come back and hit more next week, because I don't wanna.
I was just gonna say, do we want to start this panel at all? Or do we want to just do questions?
Okay, let's do, she's right. I wanted to have more fun, but mom just said the street lights are on and I have to go home. Okay? So yeah, we should probably, as much as I want to keep having fun, we should cut it out there. Okay, so before we open that next can of worms, let's take a step back and give you guys a couple minutes to ask questions. And I know that, thank you, because I know that first half of class, just getting that technology started, I know that's a bear. And it will get easier, okay? What we just did in that like hour and 5 minutes, after a little while, that's gonna be second nature. You're just gonna like do it without even thinking about it. It just takes a little time to get started, okay? But I know we did cover a lot of, there's a lot of technology to cover here. How are we doing? I'm trying to think, is that polite, or it's like, I don't know, I need a couple of days to process
Yeah.
before I decide how confused I am.
And
that's okay.
I don't know where to start.
Okay, that's okay. We will post the video, and of course, we're available. You guys can use the Facebook group to ask us questions and shoot things. Nicole is awesome, and she's keeping up with communication with you guys throughout the week. So I appreciate her for that.
Email a question, whatever.
Yeah, we're
And
here. Yes,
It could
sir.
be a question and we can just make a quick 2-minute video on it.
Yeah,
And
we're happy to do that kind of thing. That's actually a really good way. And don't be, afraid to ask questions. If you have a question, chances are somebody else in class has the same question. Everything you wanted to know about digital image editing, but we're afraid to ask.
So does it just save all these changes as you go?
Oh.
Or?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Thank you, Matt. Okay. You don't actually have to tell Lightroom to save. It automatically is, while you are working real time, updating the database. So you can just close.
It's in the history. That's what it is.
Well, that history is part of the database as well.
Yeah.
That's all written in there. So this is this is a weird thing about this program, is that it's non-destructive editing. It only happens, the image is not actually, you didn't actually change that file. It's still the exact same file it was before. You haven't done anything to it. You've just created database entries that are manipulating that. And while you did it, Lightroom saved all of it real time.
Did you even save the original photo?
It didn't have to, because you didn't actually edit it yet. So that's one of the beautiful things about Lightroom. Because it's database driven. It's like, here's our catalog with all the database information. Here's the file. You've pointed the catalog at that file. It's made a reference to that file. It's not actually opening the file in the software and changing the file. It's just creating database entries that keep track of, okay, they wanted to pop the contrast this much. And now the preview, if they did that, would look like this. But the original file is not changed. It's just a preview that's driven by that database. Okay? So that's one of the beautiful things about Lightroom, is you don't have to worry about screwing up your original files.